So here's the big picture of what we want to be covering today. We'll talk about financial literacy, uh, what that means, and it means different things to different people. Talk about my experience teaching financial literacy to men who are incarcerated. I did that at Integrity House in Newark, New Jersey. I'll talk about some of the things that I tried that definitely did not work and a few things that did work. I think we'll deal with what might be in a curriculum, what's the stuff that makes up financial literacy. I'll talk about what personal financial planners there is such a thing as a CFP, a certified financial planner. The CPA industry has another certification for personal financial planning. Talk about what they identify as important, and then talk about what's important in the real world. Also, some ideas about how it might be integrated with other subjects and how financial literacy might be presented as a standalone kind of course. Talk about it as part of the reentry process. I'll tell you what I think, and I'll ask you what you think. I will talk about this book that I've been working on. It's called The Richest Man in New Babylon. And at the end, I'll tell you what that's about, and we'll offer opportunities to see if we can collaborate on doing some things together. So in the next hour, I want to share my perspective on teaching financial literacy. We'll talk about the elements that make up a curriculum, talk about the ideal scenario for a course, offer opportunities for engagement. What is financial literacy? If you go to a website for a certified financial planner, you'll see something that says something like this. And what I've got, the ability to use knowledge and skills to make effective and informed money management decisions. It gets pretty formal. The skills are going to help you plan for the future, achieve your goals, help you through difficult times, make the most. And the big thing that you see from financial planners today is maximizing wealth. Wealth started to be a real buzzword, wealth management, instead of financial management. In my experience working with the men at Integrity House and in my own life, that kind of a definition doesn't work for me, especially in working with the men at Integrity House. I got to this place: learn the rules, understand the rules, follow the rules. Why? It will help you dig out of debt and stay out of debt. Keep at least some of the money that you worked hard to earn. Take control of your financial life and get you to a place where you just don't have to worry about money all the time. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am an MFA, not a CPA. I have a Master of Fine Arts degree in theater design. I did that for about 10 years. I worked in academic theater, and then I decided this was about the era of Woodward and Bernstein reporting on Watergate. And my mother and father both were newspaper people. And so I decided I was going to go into the newspaper business. I was a reporter for a while, worked in the copy desk, became a tech writer to make more money. I became a newspaper publisher. I purchased a newspaper in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And after 3 months, I was completely flat broke and somehow clung by my fingernails to the business for about 3 years, kept it going. Ultimately, the business failed. I went through bankruptcy. I spent a lot of time living paycheck to paycheck. After the newspaper, I became a writer, PR guy, worked in advertising and marketing, things like that. I also did some coursework. I was always sort of the computer person around the office with at the ad agency. And my last full-time job, I was a writer, PR guy. I got hired as a writer. And then I became the assistant to the IT manager. And along the way, I became the financial literacy coordinator for a little while. I was working at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, so I was hanging around a lot of professional financial people. I did, as a writer, I was doing stories about financial planning, and so by osmosis, I guess, I picked up a lot of information about it. And if you're interested in learning more about me, you can go to www.ridgekennedy.com, and there's a bunch of stuff about who I am. So, working at the CPA Society, we got a request for help. This was my introduction to financial literacy. The people at Integrity House, a woman working with women in the drug rehab program, sent in a request. I fielded it. I talked to my boss, and we got a member to come and do a presentation there was probably, at the presentation, there were probably 30 women in a room and the CPA up in the front. And he did, and these are really good people. They're volunteering their time. He really wanted to help provide useful information. And the one thing that I remember from the presentation that was stunning to me, somewhere in the middle of it, he was going through all of his stuff that he went through, and he started talking about applying for grants. And I'm just, you're saying that maybe one of these women in this program could apply for a grant, and it seemed ludicrous to me. But I could sense from everybody involved that there was a real need, and so I developed my own feelings about all of this, which was no one-shot deals. You can't go in, you can't parachute into an environment and spread wisdom and figure that that's going to really do any good. I just didn't believe it could. So after it was probably about a year or so later, maybe 2 years later, I reconnected with the people at Integrity House, and I started doing the money class, which was this was with the people at the port. I have no recollection what the acronym stands for, but these were men who were incarcerated. They were still officially under DOC control, but they were resident at Integrity House, and they were going through the Integrity House program. And I found out about the challenges that these men face, the debt, all of this stuff, the traffic ticket, all of this. And actually, when I was doing it, the last item on there, the pay to stay costs, I had not heard about that. I didn't know about medical costs either. Those are things that I was recently looking some stuff up and ran across that. The idea that you can charge somebody for the time that they are incarcerated, I mean, it just blows me away. So we would go over all of these costs, all of these dollars and cents, and then on top of that, a lot of the men had child support, and it was not unusual. I would say $10,000 to $15,000 in debt would not be unusual, especially if you include child support. So I started doing these classes. When the person who invited me to do the classes, the first thing that she thought of as something that was really of interest to the men and whatever was credit reports. So we started off with the idea that we were going to pull credit reports and examine them and talk about fixing them. Well, credit reports are really hard to obtain then. They were extremely difficult then. Now they're easier, but there's a twist to it. If you go to freecreditreport.com, you can get a credit report, but they keep trying to sell you stuff. You can do this, but you can get an add-on and whatever. And they are required by law to provide you with credit reports, but the businesses want to make money still, and so they've turned it into trying to make it into a profit center. The credit reports may not exist. If someone's been incarcerated for 10 years, there may be no record because all of the records fall off. If you go through bankruptcy, as I said, I have experience with this, go through bankruptcy, it's on your credit report for 10 years, but then it falls off. So you may not have a credit report. And of course, you're dealing with personal identification information. Credit reports were a dead end. And and also, even if you make changes, those changes take time to filter through the system. Then you have to rerun the reports. Not useful. Budgets. Now, it would seem logical that you could sit down and do a budget, and that's what I did. I went in with a laptop. I had a dedicated budget program, and we would start talking about budgets and how much for this and how much for that. And of course, you find out that everything is very complicated. One person may be staying with a relative, another person may not have any place to stay. So one person may rent, putting a roof over your head, that may be free. Another person, it may be $1,000 a month. So it's really hard to have a good group discussion. What I did find is if you did run through a budget and figure it all out, when you got to the bottom line, it was, with the note, it's depressing. You look at that and it's just like, how am I ever going to deal with that? And another question, and I don't know about you, but my wife and I don't have a budget per se. We know what our big expenses are. We kind of know what can be covered. We don't sit down and do a formal budget plan. And, even worse, when we retired, every financial planner says when you retire, you've got to go through your budget. You've got to figure everything out and make sure that, and we didn't do that. Now, so I struggle with budgets. I'll share that with you. One of my other dead ends was computer literacy. I thought that, well, if we had a little computer lab, that maybe that would be helpful. That was spurred by the idea that when I saw that if somebody went to get a job at ShopRite or at Home Depot, the managers would send the person over to a computer workstation and you'd have to fill in your job application there. And somehow or other, I thought that this would be a useful thing. So I actually arranged to set up a little computer lab using hand-me-down computers from one of the CPA firms. And it was not successful. But what I will say, and I'll mention it a little bit later, for some people, computers and automation can be really good if they have that kind of personality that they get into it. You really can do a tremendous amount of financial, you can manage all your expenses, see exactly where every dollar is going, but you've got to have the mentality that you want to do that. The things that did work, the rules, and I'll be talking about the rules. Quizzes, I would, every time I started a class, I evolved this process where every time I started a class, I had a quiz. It was on a half a sheet of standard paper, statement size, and it had some true, false questions, multiple choice, whatever. I handed out the quizzes, and they were self-graded. I didn't collect them, but it was a way to get, the men seemed to engage with it. And it introduced the topics. I would read the quiz. I would read the questions and the answers because some of the men had trouble reading. So, I would get it out there verbally as well. And they were really useful. And ultimately, it was, conversation, talk, experience. There are a lot of people that have a lot of experience with money, and some of it can be really useful. It's tricky navigating. You know, sometimes you get a really smart guy, and you know, he will suggest things that maybe are not a good idea, but the group discussions seem to be useful. Okay, subject matter. What do we all need to know? This is the nuts and bolts of financial literacy. If you know, here, if you're going to be financially literate, here's stuff that you should be, you know, very familiar with. Cash flow. You got income, you got debt. If your income is more than your debt, you're going to be happy. If you're there's a quote. I need to find that quote from Charles Dickens. If your debt is greater than your income, you're going to be miserable. A lot of focus on savings in my approach to all of this. A lot of focus on savings. And in savings, the number one item is your emergency fund. Then there's other stuff that you may be saving for, you know, down payment for a house, education, vacation, all that other stuff. But cash flow and savings right up top. Interest. Now, if you go back to the good old days, and there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. My book is The Richest Man in New Babylon. In The Richest Man in Babylon, they talk about the magic of compounding. You save a little bit of money every month, you put it in a savings account, you get 5% interest, and by the time you're ready to retire, you've got enough money to live on. And back in the 1950s, maybe that was true. Certainly interest rates today are just, you know, I mean, it's just absurd. You know, you can't get 5% interest. You know, you're on a typical savings account, you're lucky to get 1/10%. If you search around and go online, you can get 1%. So what we've got today, when we talk about interest, is the evil of compounding, because the evil, it's all about getting money away from you. It's 18% interest on a credit card. It's I don't know what student loan interest rates are like now, but I do know that they are very high. If you have any, if you miss a payment, then you get extra fees and everything. You know, there's extra interest on top of that. So interest, very, very important topic. Investing. The men were incredibly interested in investing. They had a vision that you know, you could take a few $1,000s and you can get into the stock market and you could make a lot of money. And the real world of investing is you really need to understand a 401k, or there are other versions. There's a, I want to say 403b. There are a few different plans that are similar to a 401k, but 401k is really important. Other kinds of investing, day trading is like, you know, that's people are doing day trading instead of betting on sports these days. It's not something for anybody who isn't worried about losing their money. A drip is a where you buy like 1 or 2 shares at a time, kind of a. So there are things to consider in investing, but the reality of the financial industry today is they've made things so complicated that you need an expert from the financial industry to deal with the financial industry. The reality of the financial industry is it used to be less than 10% of the American economy. Today, it's more like 25% of the American economy. And the people who are involved in finance are making money in ways that do absolutely no good for, they benefit themselves, but they don't benefit anybody else. And the prime example of that in my mind is high frequency trading. There are people who buy and sell tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of shares every single day. They buy it, they hold it for about for a few milliseconds, then they sell it, and they make a fraction of a penny on that sale. And all of those fractions of pennies turn into a whole lot of money. But what they're actually doing in the financial industry is just making money by churning money. And a lot of the financial markets today kind of function in that realm. The last item there, paying off the mortgage. This is a personal anecdote. I went to a financial planner, a really nice man, who was a member of the CPA Society, my wife and and I got all of our papers together. Here's all of our savings. Here's where, here are our expenses. Here's, I just had all the paperwork laid out. Jane has a pension. Here's the information about the pension fund and all of this. And I laid it all out. And at the end, as I was talking to this really good guy, I said, we've got this much in savings, and what we're planning on doing is taking this chunk of it and pay off the mortgage. And what he said to me was, no. He said to us, no, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is refinance the house. And then we'll take that money and we'll invest that. And, we'll earn a lot more money by doing that. And my wife and I walked out of the place, and we kind of looked at each other, and we said, probably in unison, we're going to pay off the mortgage. It just, it didn't make sense to us to do that. Subject matter, what else you need to know about? You need to know about insurance, of course, car insurance, life insurance. There are various flavors of life insurance. Term life insurance is a good thing to know about. It's a good thing to back yourselves up in case of a worst case scenario. Whole life is really a different form of investing. It sort of belongs in a different sphere. Estate and retirement planning. That may not sound like something that a man who's been incarcerated should be thinking about, but there actually are repercussions. There are things worth talking about. Your 401k plan, that is the standard retirement plan that people have today. You need to know about 401ks. Social Security, need to be realistic about it. Wills and living wills, those are things to tell people that men need to know about. How do you make decisions? And all of this stuff, the advisors, the consultants, sales reps, all of the people who, free services, if somebody sells you an insurance policy, they don't charge you anything. Well, no, they do charge you. They're getting their piece of the action. They're just getting it from, they're getting it out of what you're paying the insurance company. So all of this stuff is worth knowing about. It's not something you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time talking about, but you need to know about it. Big question, how do you get paid anytime you're talking to somebody? And that's a difficult question to ask, but worth knowing. So financial literacy class, standalone. I have done financial literacy classes. I have this sort of idea about a 10-hour class. In my imagining, I'd like to see it be 5 days a week for 2 weeks. I know that that's not a likely possibility. The curriculum, what kind of curriculum? Well, you teach the rules, tests and quizzes. I've experimented with that, worked with it, and it's been pretty good. And the idea of a textbook, that is where this book that I've been working on fits in. How can you integrate financial literacy into classes? And if you're not teaching a standalone class, are there ways to include it as part of a curriculum? And I like to think that the book that I've been working on might be something that could fit into that, into a reading English kind of a curriculum. Certainly, it could be included in math, life skills, and maybe there are other places where it could fit in. I talk about the rules. They are short, simple. You treat them like a mantra. Repeat, repeat, repeat. If students only learn the first two rules, they'll benefit. So, I like, and I've worked with some of the men, and I've got a clue about what it takes to get through. So let's talk about the rules. Rule number 1, pay yourself first. Talk to the men about, introduce that idea. What does that mean? Pay yourself first. Does that mean that you spend money on, discussion time and people come up with their ideas about it? The philosophy that I put forward is you work hard for your money. Don't you deserve to keep some of it? You treat your savings like the first and most important bill that you have to pay. The reality of life when you don't have a lot of money, and I've lived through this, the reality is you pay all of your bills and at the end you've got nothing left. On the other hand, you take off the top a little bit of your savings and you put that aside and you say, that's my emergency fund. Then you pay all the bills and you don't have anything left, but you're not broke. You've still got that money in the emergency fund and you keep working for that. Rule number 2, it's about, it's about spending. It's about, and the reality of the American economy today is that, businesses are really, really good at separating you from your money. What I like to do is present a really strong case for these guys are trying to take your money away from you. Really be assertive in trying to hold on to your money. Rule number 3, teeny tiny baby steps. Start off small, set a little goal, make that goal, then set a little higher goal, then the next one, then the next one. So that's part of the overall philosophy that comes through this. Keep it short and simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Whatever you want to do. The basic idea is to begin to put money away so that you have control over your life, over your financial life, and actually over other parts of your life. Never pay interest. Always earn interest. And so part of the philosophy that comes out of all of this is no credit card balances, no car loans, buy the used car you can afford, never pay interest. The exception we've got here is mortgage interest. But when you are buying a house, you have an asset that may appreciate in value. It probably will appreciate in value. So, that's a real investment. Now, education is tricky because what's happened in education today is that if you go to colleges, the price tag on a college education has gone through the roof. You know, it's really, if you're paying full price for a college education, you know, it becomes questionable. When you get into education in other venues, when you get into the kind of trade school education things and, you know, DeVry and people like that, you've really, really got to be careful whether you're going to get enough out of it to, you know, I think a lot of education that's sold today, it's very questionable that you are going to, you know, that you're actually going to come out ahead. So I urge a lot of caution in that area when I'm talking to people about this. Practice, practice, practice. Get a little better every day. You're gonna make mistakes. You got to keep at it. You got to keep going. Keep working. Keep trying to get better. Make it as automatic as you can. One of the nice things about the computer and all of the stuff that goes with it is that you can automate so much of what you're doing. You can automate your savings. You know, you can work with your employer. A lot of employers, you can automatically have your money put away. You can have automatic bill payment. You know, you can, you know, there's just a tremendous amount that you can do to just keep your hands off your money, and that makes it easier to hang on to it. Investing in insurance, and I'll make a comment right here. Each time when I was doing the classes on this, every time I would keep repeating rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3. We would go through a litany of the rules until we got to whatever the current topic was. So each time we get to a new rule, we're going back and we're talking about what's rule number 1? Pay yourself first. What's rule number 2? If you want to have more money, spend less. What's rule number 3? So the idea is to keep building every time. So you want to know the odds and remember the house always wins. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Talking about investing in insurance. It's about the odds. Are you going to make safe bets or are you going to take risky bets? And certainly in the environment where I was, the idea of talking about betting, you know, the men understood that. They got it. Index funds, that's the safe bet. That's where you can take, you can bet on the entire stock market rather than on one stock. And I will, this is just a little note that I threw in here. The ideal terminal math class, you know, if you know, these days, if you start pursuing math, you know, in high school, you know, they'll lead you to calculus. It shouldn't be. Everybody should be studying statistics because it's statistics that tell you about the stock market. It's statistics that tell you about whether you can win in Las Vegas. It's statistics that you know, there's just so much in life is built on statistics. That's, everybody should be studying statistics. Rule number 8, things never stay the same. So you have to anticipate change. You have to plan for the future. If you don't, somebody else will take control. This is where we talk about, do you have a will? What, you know, what are, you know, what are your plans? And most important things in life are free. That's true. It's true. So when I go through, when I was doing the classes with the men, it wasn't as good as what you're seeing now, because this has been, you know, in years in the thinking and the making and the rethinking and whatever. But this is the gist of what I was doing when I was doing the classes at Integrity House. And subsequent to that, well, let's see. What do you need? You need, okay, worksheets, courseware. What about a story? And this is where it gets to the idea of a book, a story, a textbook, a financial literacy classic. There's this book called The Richest Man in Babylon, and it was written, it actually is a collection of pamphlets. The first one was written in about 1926. And people on the financial side, the CPAs, the people that I worked with, they remembered it. They thought it was just great, and they really, it had this sort of aura about it. And yet there was this problem because it was set in 5000 BC, and it was written in this kind of funny these and thous and saveths and things like that. Funny names and things like that. So I was thinking about all of that, and I thought about the idea of how could I come up with a resource that would be better. And so the rules, you've just seen the rules. That was part of my thinking, and I can provide summaries of that for you if you're interested. The other thing I thought about was the idea of a new story, a story set in the present in which a man is released from incarceration and he learns the rules. He meets people and he has relationships. He discovers more about himself, and he learns who to trust and who not to trust, and people along the way teach him the rules. Advanced reader review copies. If I have a bunch of review copies out. It's all electronic. It's not print, but I have PDFs, Word docs, ebook formats, and if people are interested in reading the book and giving me feedback, that's an opportunity that's available. I'm interested in course development, and I would like to work with a few people to see if, and since you are involved in the education side of this, if any of you saw this as being a potential textbook that you wanted to work with and develop courseware for, develop a syllabus for, that's something that I'm very interested in. This is my contact information, and I'd say at this point, it's time if we have any Q&A. I don't know what our time is. I haven't been paying attention. Okay, that was, we're in good time. If anybody, so if there are questions, let me know. If you've got my email address, if you want to contact me offline, you can certainly do that. What else?
Mr. Kennedy, my name is Rodney Jenkins. I'm the principal of Sojourn High School. My teacher, Ms. Murder, who teaches financial literacy, is on with us on the phone, so she can't put on a chat, but I'm sure she would like to get in contact with you to kind of share that video, especially as we go into our virtual world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave her information on the chat, her email information, and if you would just get in touch with her, that would be great.
I'd be delighted.
Thank you, sir.
And that's great. Mr. Jenkins is working at that Sojourn High School. It's at the Essex County Juvenile Detention Center in Newark. So that would, Ridge, that would be wonderful for you. It's you used to go to the Integrity House, so this would close by.
Right. Yeah, I'm you know, this is this is all really in an interesting place. Like a couple of years ago, I was actually reaching out and trying to find people like the people who are watching right now to interact with in order to develop things further. And then I contacted a few places, and I just didn't do enough follow up. And I ended up sort of saying to myself, okay, just get it done, make it happen. And so that's where I'm at right now. It's like, let's get it out the door. But the reality of this is there is still time to adjust and make changes based on input from anybody. And on the other hand, I'm also really interested in working with people piloting things so that we can say to the rest of, to everybody else, okay, we've worked with this, here's what we found out, we can improve it based on that feedback, but also we can promote it to other people if it proves to be a good tool. I mean, I believe in it. I think the story is a good story. Obviously I'm the writer, and so I am, as the author, I feel close to it. I will add that I have had other people. I've had a few men who were in. There was a second place. It's not Integrity House. It's another facility in Newark, and I can't think of the name of it right now. But I did some programs. I did a couple of classes there, but they were the people kept going away. I didn't have very much consistency with them, but I had a couple of readers there. And I also had a man named Boris Franklin, who is, he did 2 bids, and one was a total of about 17 years. And he read it and gave me a lot of feedback, and that has been incorporated. So, it's not all pie in the sky. So, there has been some real world review that's taken place of the book, of the Richest Man in New Babylon. And another thing that I will add, just as an aside, is that the title may change, because I'm going back and forth. I have some other people who've reviewed it say, well, the richest man in Babylon, the richest man in New Babylon, is that just too close and whatever? So it's possible that I may, that the title may change, but just sharing.